I'm going to go to therapy and I'm going to work on my trauma, and then everything is going to be different. Everything's going to be better. And it is a process. And a lot of times our progress isn't always these big noticeable shifts. Sometimes they are, but sometimes our progress is more subtle too. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Coachable podcast. You're here for another episode, but it's not going to be like any other episode because I am joined by a new friend, Sue McDonnell, who is actually from Dublin, living in Australia, and somehow from across the world, we were able to connect online. And immediately when I spoke to Sue, there was a recognition, a respect, an admiration for her and her work and the way that she shows up in the world. It's something that is really, really refreshing. And it's also like palpable in terms of her authenticity. And that's one of the things that I really want to dive into with her today. But before we do that, I just want to say, Sue, thank you for being here and for coordinating across time zones to make this happen. I'm so excited to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, Tori. That's a really touching introduction. And as we say in Australia, same, in that I really felt that resonance with you. And I felt called to have a conversation with you that hopefully through both our paths, we can be of service. So thank you so much for having me on today.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you are a professional woman. You've been doing executive coaching and run your own business for 7 years, I think is right. You've worked in multiple different industries and worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients. And you do really, really profound work in terms of helping your clients achieve transformation. And you've also been walking your own personal transformation path for quite a while. And that's what I'm really interested in talking to you about. Can you just give listeners and myself a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and kind of where you are in your life today as it pertains to maybe your professional life, your personal life? Just help us get to know you a little bit.
Sure. So clearly I'm Irish, living in Sydney for the last 21 years. Have always had a fascinating interest in people. My mum said at 2 weeks old, I was turning my head to look at who was coming in the door, which was very different to my brother and sister. So I've always had a really deep curiosity for how people show up in the world. And as part of that, really, I have committed my life, I guess, to being of service and to doing my own healing work, of which there is plenty.
Sure.
That's been great. And I think, I often say to clients, you can't really lead people through transformation unless you're doing the work yourself, right? So, of course, there's times where I'm out of my integrity and not always 100% on, but I do my very best to kind of model what I teach or model what I share. And that's required me to really be available for some very big lessons from the universe, which has been very tricky. And I guess that's why cliches are cliches. So when you say things like hindsight is a great thing, you can look back and see why something happened. Mm-hmm. But when you're in the depths of that fire, it's sometimes quite difficult to see that. So yeah, I suppose what I'm learning is a path to peace, really. In my own life. Yeah.
Isn't that really what we're all chasing after? One of the things I too have really, really spent a good bit of time over the last few years thinking about. It's how do we really relieve ourselves from our suffering and from our pain and ultimately live in a state of peace where we're not always a victim of our circumstance or just kind of tossed around by what's happening in our lives, but we can really stay grounded and rooted in who we know ourselves to be and the truth of who we are despite circumstance. And like you said, it can be definitely tricky. Something that you said that really sticks out to me, and I think is one of the reasons I initially connected with you so deeply is your commitment to walking the talk and to practicing what you preach. But really just to living and embodying integrity in your work and in your life. And part of that is having the willingness to say, hey, I need help too, or hey, I'm going through something too. And right before this, before we started to record, we were talking about kind of, what that transformational journey looks like, and some of the pitfalls that some of us fall into, and maybe the beliefs that we can create around getting to a destination, or feeling like we have to be fully healed before we can, experience certain things or have certain things. What has your transformational journey looked like personally? Like, how did you get into this work? And outside of being curious about people and wanting to understand kind of your role in the world and your place in it, how did you get into this deeper personal work?
Yeah, so I think it's been it's been a journey actually from in my own life. I've started off really around working in human resources and working in organizational development and doing my studies in that area. And as part of that, I guess, learning how to journal and learning how to really reflect on my own behavior. So I was very young, like I was probably 25 and sitting on a leadership team, and I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. But I knew that there was something about that development piece that was very powerful for me. And long story short, really, it's been a journey of sort of head to heart to gut. And so, I started off doing coaching where it was all like, the grow model and outcomes and objectives and all that kind of stuff. And then I got really bored with that really quickly. And then I wanted to move more into sort of heart space. So I was moving more into my own heart. And really, that's when I studied psychotherapy, because that's about care of the soul. Literally, that's what it means. And so you have to do your own therapy work. You have to be in group therapy. So nothing is hidden, really. Through relationships as well, through my intimate relationships, I learned a lot about myself. And then I think, without sounding crazy, like the spiritual path opened up for me. And I guess I became very much in touch with a different way of being in the world. So, and that really is grounded in theory, practice, discipline, and commitment. And I think there's been several times where I've wanted to go, God, I wish my life was different. I wish I was just one of those people that wasn't sensitive and didn't feel things. But the truth is, for whatever reason in this path, I've chosen this. And so it's much better, I've found, for me to not resist stuff. Like when I resist things, that's when it goes all pear-shaped. But when I'm really with whatever it is, and we're not taught how to do that when we're growing up. We're not taught how to really be with pain, grief, suffering, loss, whatever it is. Or joy, actually. I think, we as Irish people, there's a reason why we're a nation of poets, writers, because there's a deep collective grief that we probably don't always know how to lean into and how to feel the opposite of that, which is joy. So I think there's probably 5 things I've done that have really kind of helped me. If your listeners were interested in kind of some more practical stuff, would that be somewhere useful to go to?
Please.
So I think when I was coaching years ago, I used to find like that for some of my clients, things didn't stick. And so then that led me to a different level of curiosity. And what I realized was actually, to be blunt, for me, and I'm saying this is my opinion, I'm not saying I'm right, there's no point in doing anything unless you learn how to regulate your nervous system. Because, we have so much coming at us, we're either in fight, flight, fawn, or freeze a lot of the time. And so really learning how to tools and practices to bring us back into our body, bring us back into nature, that's extremely important. And there's so much sort of research out there and so many tools and practices. I think the second thing I'd say is, really.
Can I just stop you real quick? And I want to go into this because I'd love to break this down a little bit, each of these for our audience, so they can really ground in it. And so if you're listening to this, I encourage you to take out maybe a pen, a journal, a piece of paper, so you can jot these 5 things down as you navigate your own personal journey. And also learn some practical things, because regulating your nervous system is so, so, so critical. And I think, to your point, Sue, is a place, a starting point for so many people. And like you said earlier, we're not taught how to do this. I certainly wasn't. I didn't, whether it's learning to co-regulate with a caregiver or a friend or someone else, or learning how to regulate my own nervous system. I just want to provide a little bit of context, and you can help me with this. It is understanding when your body is having a stress response, when you are either like hypervigilant and you're in some kind of fight or flight response, or you're in a shutdown response based on what's happening around you, your circumstances. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that we cannot control that are happening outside of our what we would like to happen, what's ideal, what we thought would happen. And we walk out our door every morning, or maybe we even just like wake up and look at our phone. And for many of us, we're immediately shot into some kind of stress response because we're looking at our text messages, who didn't text us back or did text us, who's in our email inbox. We're immediately looking at all the problems or things that we have to do that day. And I know for myself, for a long, long time, I woke up and I thought that a high level of stress and a hypervigilant kind of on guard way of being in the world was normal, quote unquote. I thought like, oh, everyone feels like this, because I didn't know what it felt like to relax and to feel safe and to really be regulated. I'd love for you to just kind of expand on that in terms of what is emotional or nerve system regulation, and how can we, maybe what are some of those practices that we can learn to start to regulate our nervous system so that we can apply some of the other things that you're going to share with us?
Yeah, great. Look, first of all, thanks so much for sharing that, Tori. I really appreciate it. And just to say, me too. So, and I think the first thing I'd say is what I try to do with my clients and with myself is to try and make anything not wrong. So there's nothing wrong in how we have come to be here today, right? There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. And society has programmed us to think there's something wrong with us.
Right.
So actually, if you reflected on this, and if I reflected on this, there'll be part of that sort of nervous system hypervigilance that actually served us and probably got us to where we are today, because there's a drive that goes with that, right? But what I say to my clients is, wouldn't you want to experience that same drive without the anxiety? Like, that's right. It's not like, because people often say to me, but I'm afraid if I kind of give this up, like, how will I function in the world? And, they say that about everything. If I'm a perfectionist, what will that be? So to answer your question, I think the first simple thing to do is to become really self-aware around your triggers, right? And notice, okay, actually, my system feels safe with Tori right now. I feel very comfortable, and I know what safety feels like in my body. Right. So first of all, there's a deep knowing of getting to know your body in a way that we've never been taught, particularly as women, right? There's a lot of shame around bodies. That's a whole podcast in itself.
Yes.
And so that's the first thing, figuring out where you're safe, then figuring out where you're not safe, and then actually thinking about what are the things I need to do to regulate my nervous system. What are my responses? So let's say, for example, if you're someone who tends to be a people pleaser, and I'm a recovering people pleaser, then it's really that type of person. I don't want to categorize everybody in the same box. Generally is very good at being a caretaker and meeting everyone else's needs at their own expense. And so they're not in touch with their own needs. So often with a client like that, we would work with getting them in touch with their body, getting them in touch with their needs, getting really clear on what a pathway forward might be for them, where, that cliche of oxygen mask on first. So that's the first thing I would recommend as a very simple way of getting clear. And there are so many things that are online that are free. that you can do for your body. So that's one little tip.
Yeah, I love that, because this is the introduction to moving out of your head and into your heart, like you were talking about. I remember when that happened for me so clearly. I remember when I first became aware of it, which is what you're saying is the first step. And I was standing in a Whole Foods line, and I was being really curious. I was asking big questions. I knew what I was doing in my life wasn't working for me, but I didn't know what to do next or what the path to transformation and unlocking all of this was. And so I followed my curiosity, and I was talking to this girl in Whole Foods, and she said, first of all, she just told me to become aware of my body. And she said, put your arms down, because I was crossing my arms. I was like, my body positioning, the way I was holding myself was cross-armed, and I was putting out energetically and just physically showing like I was closed off, and I was like tight and holding tension in my body. She's like, put your arms down. And just that act alone felt like an act of, one, surrender, but also it was a little bit triggering, because it was like all of a sudden I'm not protecting myself, right? I was subconsciously just protecting myself by just standing in this kind of position. And then so I did that, and then she told me to take a deep breath, and she said, breathe in through your nose, and breathe into your belly, into your chest, and into your head, and then release it slowly. And I did that. And then I thought to myself, I couldn't tell you, if there has ever been a time where I consciously did that. And I was like 27 at the time. And I had this moment of recognition and grief, and also epiphany. Grief that I had never consciously really breathed. Like I couldn't tell you when the last time I took a deep breath was. And also this awareness of how much life have I been missing out on, because this was my natural state all of the time. And so I like to just share stories like that, because I hope it gives you guys a reference point for what that can just look like in your life practically. But sometimes it's not as clear as we think it is, or how do I know if I'm dysregulated? Right.
Absolutely. And I think just to build on that, I had chronic fatigue for 5 years when I was younger. And what I realize now, as I'm older, chronic fatigue starts by not breathing properly, because you're not allowing oxygen into your body, right? And so I said to you before we recorded, illness has been a path to transformation for me. And I'm sort of ready to choose an easier path now, which feels great. But actually that breathing practice has been, if people did nothing else but learned how to breathe properly, the world would be a different place.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for some people who, as you said, like sometimes we're in a line at a shop and something happens and we're triggered into a past event, which brings me to the next point, which is about identifying your traumas, right? And you'll know about this, you've got big T and little t, and, little trauma might be, I looked at my mom for attention and she didn't give it to me. I can't believe I said mom, like I'm turning into an American. And big T, is, the traumas that we're more familiar with, like war, for example. And so actually really working with somebody, and that goes back to your point about co-regulation. I would say to people, find a really good therapist. And look, I'm saying this as a psychotherapist myself. There are mixed abilities out there. So you have to find someone that resonates with you. And my advice around that would be, when I'm seeking someone to work with myself, I would tend to set up a call with them and ask them questions like, look, how are you learning and growing in your own life? What's your personal development practice? What do you do when you're triggered with a client? So that you can actually get an understanding of, is this person really open-hearted, and are they willing to work with me in a vulnerable way? And a lot of people, what I found in my practice is they will give their power away, whether that's to a therapist, a doctor, or whatever. And I've been on my own journey about this, and they will actually not take responsibility for their own lives. So my job, I always say, is to make myself redundant as quickly as possible. and that to work with them and co-collaborate. So whenever they try to put something on me, which is, oh my God, Sue, that was amazing, blah, 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 I always go, no, no, no. You're the one that's amazing. I just held space for you and maybe have a few technical tips. So I think there's something there about the trauma world. And I actually think it's a very overused word at the moment, I've got to say. So, but I do think there's something around releasing things. It makes us more available for what you said, which is that life force which comes in through the breath.
It's so critical. And for me, it was one of those things. I didn't know or have a context for what my life could be like, or what I was really missing out on because I'd never experienced it before, right? Like I love that you tell people and you encourage people to interview their therapist. Like it's almost like if you were interviewing someone for a job or for, you're dating people, like are we compatible? Are you also doing the work, right? I actually was getting my hair done recently, and my hairstylist was saying that she'd recently gone to therapy, and actually that she was she was trying multiple therapists because she was like looking for that right fit. And some of this too, to your point, is like there's a knowing, there's like a settling that happens when you're in the presence of somebody who you can feel safe with. And that is, for those who might not know what it feels like to be regulated, if you were like me and you lived in a constant state of dysregulation like I did, it was all of a sudden when I started to get around people who had this level of awareness, it was it unlocked this within me. And it was almost like just like it was a settling. All of a sudden I didn't have to protect myself so much, or I wasn't so afraid or like so in my head. I could actually access my emotions in my heart space. So I love that you encourage people to one, kind of do the interview process with your therapist, but also kind of what that might feel like when you do find the right fit, and exploring your traumas, because that's all of our unresolved stuff that brings up our anxiety and our stress and our fear, is really just pressing on those things that we haven't looked at and worked on.
Absolutely. And I'd like to go back to something you said a while ago, which is about that sort of asking for help and knowing, and I think that, I've been, I suppose, doing the work for 25, 26 years. And, I still, like, I'm working with two mentors at the moment. So I've got a business mentor and I'm on a mastermind, which I'm happy to talk about either of those if that's of interest to anyone. But I think why I raise those issues is because the path of healing, transformation, becoming whole, whatever you want to call it, in my humble experience, the stakes get higher. So as you reach a new level of development, you're given different tests. And so therefore, like, what I look for is mentors who've been on that path. So I'm not saying they're better than me or that I'm worse than them, not at all. But what I'm saying is sometimes we need someone who can open that pathway for us and show us what, as you said, what's possible. So I'll give you a simple example of that. My home environment is not what I want it to be. So I've been exposed to toxic mold in different homes, and I've had a huge amount of health issues with that. And excuse me, I'm in a mastermind with Peter Crone at the moment.
Oh, I love Peter. Oh,
he's amazing.
I love him so much. And I was on the verge of joining my mastermind myself. So it's so
Tori,
good. I know.
It's so good. It's so good.
Him.
I'd love to have you there. We can join the next one and I can debrief you and stuff. But I ended up, there's 200 and something people on the mastermind, and I was fortunate enough to spend some one-on-one time with him. And he was saying to me, look, it's obvious you've done a lot of work on yourself. But what he really helped me see was, he said, what do you want in your life around your home? And I told him, and he said, okay, so what are you tolerating? What are you still tolerating? And I got goosebumps because I was like, oh my God, like, I'm tolerating living in this environment because I've got fear. right? I've got fear around, And I think that we talked about this on the phone recently, then it raised a bigger, and that's what good mentors do. They
Yeah.
say something and then you go away and ask yourself the questions. And he said to me, look, for you, I think what you're trying to do is figure it out with your head. And for you as a
Listening to and moving it, leaning into the spaces that feel tight and constricted or more scary, or that evoke that fear or evoke that anxiety, and lean into that at the moment. And then we'll work on or be called to work on a different aspect of ourselves later. It's like you can't we can't tackle everything at once,
right.
and I think that's like the illusion. I think a lot of us get caught up in thinking is that like, I'm going to go to therapy and I'm going to work on my trauma and then everything is going to be different. Everything's going to be better. And it is a process. And a lot of times our progress isn't always these big noticeable shifts. Sometimes they are, but sometimes our progress is more subtle too. For me, it's around getting better at recognizing the subtle things that are really wins for me. Like, oh, actually, this thing happened that would have really, really triggered me. And yeah, today I got triggered, but I didn't linger in that
Exactly.
space or that emotion for as long as I typically would. Like
Exactly.
that doesn't
Exactly.
always look like progress the way we think it would, but that is
Yeah.
in the journey.
Oh, look, I couldn't agree more. And I think I'm just back from a trip to my homeland. And, there's some complex dynamics in my family, as in most families. And, absolutely love and adore my family. And the stuff for me that's been tricky because I'm very different to the rest of my family. And I have to say, that's exactly what I noticed, that I would still get triggered and I would still maybe not handle it as skillfully as I would like, but it was better. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
more able to, and what you said comes back to our conversation about the nervous system, because I was able to regulate quicker. And that's the progress, right? It's not like where you clean a bathroom and you see the bathroom sparkling clean, like that's the outcome, it's done, and you can
Right.
see it's not like that, like because
Mm-hmm.
human beings are complex and
Mm-hmm.
life is complex and it's tricky. But I
Yeah.
also think life is beautiful, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that we are gifted what we can handle. I really do. And I think I look, without being too dramatic, I do feel like the last 2.5 years, I think we are in some kind of post trauma after COVID. I think that's been incredible what it's done to people from everything you can think of: fear,
Yeah.
shame, isolation, um, polarity. Now we've got all this stuff in Iran. Like there's so many ways we could take this conversation, but I
Mm-hmm.
do feel there's a piece about the divine feminine rising, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and women being given a voice and women really stepping into their power. And that requires us to have regulated nervous systems.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I want to just bring it back quickly before we go to your next point, and your next tip, which is what Peter so so poignantly like offered you, which was just a question, and which was, what are you tolerating? And I just want to offer that to everyone listening. Like, if they're like, what area of your life are you intentionally working to change? Like, we all have something we would like, an outcome we would like to create, a circumstance, like a dream that you're chasing, or something you're wanting to shift, whether it's, you just want to tap into a different level of your potential in that area. And asking yourself, what are you tolerating? I've been having many conversations recently with very close friends of mine. We're in our 30s, early 30s, women, single, and navigating relationships and love, and the complexities of all of that, right? And as women who've been doing a lot of work on themselves and uh, have a certain level of awareness and stuff, I really believe relationships of any kind, whether they're romantic or friendships or otherwise, are our kind of playground, or are for putting into practice the things that we've been learning and working on. But also we learn in contrast, right? We know what we want because a lot of times experience what we don't want. Right. So, and having the willingness to say, hey, is what I'm tolerating actually the thing that's preventing me from experiencing the thing that I do want? Because if I'm gripping this thing that I'm tolerating because it feels safe or it feels familiar, whether it's a home, whether it's a person, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a job, and it feels scary to release it and to let it go, I want to encourage people to know it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel that fear. Like, actually, that's very normal. And you don't need to expect yourself not to feel fear to think that's the right move for you, right? Actually releasing it creates space for the thing that you really want to come into your life. And I experienced that just like holding my body that way, right? Like, how much am I creating an environment where I'm actually repelling the thing that I want, which is connection, just because this feels safe.
I love that. I love that. And I think, in fact, the first personal development book I ever read, which is very old now, was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I hear what you're saying. Like, for me, like, I'm obviously at a different stage of life too. I'm in my 50s now, but relationship is still a container, right?
Yeah.
Where, and what I feel, and I'm happy to be wrong about this. I don't ever need to be right about anything. I feel for a lot of younger women, actually, it comes back to self-worth. Like, what do you really feel you're worth? Because, I coach a lot of very senior women who are very successful and yet tolerate things in their lives that they wouldn't if it was a work context, they wouldn't if it was a friend, but they do because it's a man. And I'm going, okay, or a woman, and I'm going, well, hang on. Like, let's talk about that intimacy and let's have a difficult conversation here in the room, just you and me. What do you really want to say to that person?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to say to yourself about how you're allowing this to happen? No judgment, no criticism. We've all been there.
Yeah.
But actually, as you say, how do we get clear on what we do want so we can release what we don't want? And 100% echo what you said, Tori, that any change is scary because we don't like uncertainty. Uncertainty is hard for us, right? So that's why I have such admiration for you with what you're doing with your life and traveling and, like, you've inspired me to go, okay, like, I'm not stuck in Sydney. If I want to experience something else, I have to expand into that.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for that acknowledgement. I appreciate it. I really, I try to be like you in the way that I want to live out what I talk about. And I saw myself at a point at the end of last year, I saw an opportunity for me personally to experience transformation through experiencing my life in a new way. And I really believe, one of the easiest ways to create transformation is to put yourself in a new environment, to get yourself out of the environment that you are traditionally in. And so I've talked about it on the show many times, but intentionally doing the thing I was scared of, like leaving the familiar, stepping into the uncertainty, and being received by it. Actually, things happening that were beautiful and magical and things that I could have never, really predicted or planned for. It gave me all of these new reference points for actually uncertainty isn't bad. Actually, it's where like the unknown is where all of the miracles also exist. All possibility exists there. The things that I want and all of the scenarios I'm playing out in my mind that could go wrong, but they all exist in the unknown. And if I'm willing to step into that with an open heart and with a clear intention, I'm much, much more likely to experience the good. And that's been my experience.
Oh my God, I love that. And I think even what we say to ourselves about ourselves and the world around us, like, really simple thing was, I went to get a coffee this morning, haven't quite kicked that habit. I love my morning coffee and I love going to the coffee shop actually and chatting to people. Anyway, as I was leaving this morning, I know this sounds strange, but I just had this thought, which was, everybody loves me.
Yes.
then I went to the coffee shop, and normally no one really, like the guy in the coffee shop talks to me, I talk to him, but I had like three different conversations, right? And I was going, that's really weird. And I realized when I came home, it was because literally I was radiating love. Now, I know for some
Mhm.
people that might sound crazy, but I don't care because I'm figuring out what works for me. And I'm
Right.
going, okay, that feels good, right? And then if this
Yeah.
is too personal, by the way, you can edit this out, what I'm about to
Bring it
say.
on.
So just let me know. But I really was touched by how you've spoken about your mother on a few
Mhm.
occasions. I've
Mhm.
gone back and looked at that. And this again might sound a little out there, but I lost a sister quite early on in my life. And I almost feel like now that perhaps there's a calling for us, and push back if this doesn't feel right for you, almost like the divine feminine's rising in you with what you're talking about. And those terms are a little strange, but actually just that you're moving into being empowered, and
Yeah.
that perhaps you have an angel, and I have an angel, and that we've got like someone holding space for us in a different realm, which
Mhm.
we can also call on, right? We can
Mhm.
also call on our ancestors
Yeah.
that have passed.
Yeah.
So there's a beautiful book called Didn't Start With You by Mark
Yeah.
One. I think we
Yeah.
spoke about that briefly. And that's like a fairly inexpensive resource to get your hands on and to go back and look at, okay, what are the things in my family line that perhaps I want to look at, and getting the support around that. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit there in what I've said, but just to check in with you,
Mhm.
is that okay for me to raise that? Does any of
Absolutely.
that resonate?
I love that. I welcome it. And I'm so glad you went there because you're seeing something in me that I'm experiencing in myself that I don't know if everyone can see. I think you're mirroring to me something I'm experiencing myself, which is this evolution of me expanding um, out of an it's almost like the transformation process. I sometimes think of it like the evolution of a caterpillar into a butterfly, right? Where you're in a cocoon, we're in a box, have a certain way of thinking, a certain way of being in the world. For me, for the majority of my life was a very uh, sort of hyper masculine doer, performer, get it done. Uh, I was very competitive. It served me beautifully. There was a lot that I was rewarded for that. And after the death of my mom and my sister, both, I started to sense the contrast of um, being swinging too far to of the pendulum to too far to the masculine side, and wanting to integrate and learn more about the feminine, the feminine qualities that felt more unfamiliar and foreign to me, and leaning into those. And that has been work I've been doing over the last year, heavily, and even more over the last 6 months, especially on my trip. So I appreciate your recognition of that. And I'm navigating, I'm figuring it out. I'm learning a new aspect of who I am, because this caterpillar is then, you know, the caterpillar doesn't know what it's becoming. It doesn't know it's
Yes.
becoming a butterfly. It just comes out of the dark shell that it's been in. And then there's this beautiful expansion. And and I feel like that's the process we're in over and over and over as human beings. It's like, what's the next level? You said it's like, okay, as we ascend, as we grow, as we develop, then there's new tests, then there's new lessons, then it changes. And for me, in this part of my life, it's been learning how to integrate playfulness, how to integrate sensuality, how to allowance, instead of control. So,
Yes. Yes. And
being
that lightness.
surprised. Yeah. Allowing life to surprise me, and having a deep trust in that grounded masculine trust, like I got you, but also this flow, like presence of childlike presence, this playful presence, the one that's very deeply connected to how she feels and is oftentimes using, for me, you touched on this earlier, my feelings as a way to inform why I'm getting certain outcomes in my life. You were talking about it with the coffee shop. You're like, you were radiating a frequency of feeling good, right? And I remember learning this and thinking, wow, I can't believe this has never dawned on me, but what would happen if I just prioritized feeling good? Like feeling good in my body. Like the only priority was like, I'm going to do things that feel good, not as a way to escape my problems, but as a way to really give myself the permission that it's okay to feel that good, to feel that much joy, to feel that much love.
I love that. I love that. And I think the risk, and this is where my Virgo comes in with the risk, the kind of
Sure.
the risk with that, I think, and tell me, because I could be wrong in your experience, is like sometimes then what we can do is like spiritually bypass. And
Sure.
I hear you saying you don't do that. That's great. But just for people
Yeah.
listening, it's about like being really clear about like emotions are data, right?
Yeah.
And so even if I'm feeling sad, actually, how can I sit with that emotion? Because emotions are meant to pass through us. And again, as you said earlier, we've never been taught that, right?
Right.
And then thinking about what do I want to create, and then how do I, because it's almost like this is a danger for me because I also have that very strong masculine, and I've been working on that for a long time. Is what I've had to call myself up on is like this kind of need to ascend, right? Because that's also for me quite masculine, like, oh, what's the next level? Where am I going? And
Yes.
actually, there is nowhere to get to. It's actually just about this moment right here, right now. And my mind struggles with that, but that's okay because my mind's job is to help me survive. My mind's not going to want me to evolve, right? So I have to kind of wrap my mind up like a little baby in my arms and go, I've got you. And just get out of my way for 5 minutes while I try to explore this. And then you can come back in and evaluate all you want. But right now, I need space and time. I always say that to my clients. If I get 2 words tattooed on their wrist, it would be space and time, because when we have space and time, we get clear. And what you said is so beautiful about that deep trust, and that trust of self, trust of life, which can be difficult. It's not easy. It's not like I'm sitting here with Pollyanna positive going, it's all beautiful.
Sure.
And the
Well,
other
I've
thing I
learned,
think, sorry.
well, I was just going to say, but I learned that living in a state of not trusting life didn't give me the outcome that I wanted either. So it was almost like, okay, expecting the worst to happen, not trusting myself, not trusting life, not trusting in a higher being or force or God or whatever. It was
Exactly.
like, then what I'm doing is I'm subscribing to a belief that I'm out here on my own and that I have to make it all. I have to, like, no one's coming. This whole idea, no one's coming to save you, which we all have to take personal responsibility for our lives and our results and our outcomes 100%. But that was the thing that put me on a deeper spiritual path, because I had to connect with something, this belief that how would I be experiencing life if I really believed that it was working out? Like you said earlier, that there is nothing wrong. And there's part of us that wants to create problems, or like, I saw it in myself, like I'm creating problems to solve them because my masculine side likes to figure things out. But like this ease of what if, even in my quote unquote negative feelings, my sadness, my grief, there was nothing wrong with it. It was actually beautiful feedback and information that I could be with. I didn't have to make it into much more than that, and I could sit with it. But when I talk about feeling good now, it's using that almost as I set the temperature of my environment, because feeling good is what I prioritize. So it's like, okay, if this interaction with this person always leaves me feeling like I'm questioning myself, or I feel insecure when I'm around them, like let that feedback like also inform, how I choose to spend my time, or if I spend it with that
Absolutely.
person.
Absolutely. I've got a really good friend who says, she makes her decisions on the basis of now, like just say someone asks her to a party, she just tunes in and she goes, does this feel like energetically light or heavy? And
Yeah.
she makes life decisions on that basis, right? And simple and all as that may sound, it's very powerful. And like to your point, I really agree with you. Like for me, we actually are very limited in our human mind and our brain, but actually life can be limitless. And if I give, I'm not saying give my power over, but if I include God, the universe, source, whatever your belief is in my life, I have no idea what my path is, right? And that's the uncertainty. But I know that there's a higher source that's looking after me
Mhm.
that has greater thoughts or feelings or manifestations, whatever you want to say, for me than I ever could possibly have.
Mhm.
And so it's about actually how do I open up to
Mhm.
that presence that is fully supportive, because we can feel alone in this journey. I can certainly. I've felt deep loneliness at times in my life, and had very negative thoughts and about what am I doing here, what's it all about, and actually tuning in and realizing that, as you say, this too shall pass.
Mhm.
This is a moment that I'm meant to be experiencing. And then what I realize is that when I go into those moments with deep love for myself, deep acceptance, deep curiosity, I always come out the other side
Yeah.
feeling better, stronger, whatever. It's just hard to see it when you're in the flame of the fire,
Sure.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. There's a book that I read at least once a year, and it unlocked so much for me. And every time I read it, I get more from it. It's by Marianne Williamson. It's called A Return to Love. And in that book, she says, what if you believed that there was a God, basically that, or a higher power, whatever, that you were part of, that actually that loves you. And what the thing that got me is, what if you believed that you could afford to relax? And that hit on this shield, this armor that I'd been carrying around, this masculine part of me that felt like I needed to dominate, or I needed to perform, I needed all these ways that I was protecting myself. It's like, what if that was not necessary, because I trusted that it was actually okay? Because the surrender wasn't giving up. It was just a deeper level of trust that actually I am, um, like everything is unfolding for me, and things are happening for me and not to me. And choosing to see life through that lens has given me the ability to navigate the hardest parts of life. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I love Marion Williamson. I've seen her a
Mhm.
couple of times when she's been here, and I just think, I mean, talk about someone who models what she teaches. My God.
Yeah,
And you know what I love about her as well? She's got a ferocity to her, Marion
she
Williamson. Like
does.
she's like straight to the truth, right?
Yep.
And so, there's also room for that. There's also room for that, and that relaxing, realizing life is working for you. Um, Very, very powerful things you've just said,
Mhm.
Tori. And how is that manifesting in your life right now with your move, can I ask?
Yeah, it's I think it's given me the ability to be with what is right now, which is uncertainty and a transition and a lot of change over the last few months. And there have been times I could sense myself wanting to control, wanting to just make hasty decisions because I need to have a direction. I need to know what's going to happen, right? I need to know where I'm going to live, or like have this level of control over something that I initially intended to allow to organically unfold. And I can feel it energetically when I'm trying to push my timeline on things and my agenda with things, as opposed to allowing myself to be with the discomfort of, okay, this isn't happening at the speed I would like or in the way I would like. And Peter Crone has helped me to realize that like things might not always be ideal. Things, it doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, that it's not what I would have chosen or how I would have liked it to unfold, but can I be with what is? Can I be
That's
with it?
right. I think he says, I don't want to misquote him, but he says something beautiful like, things are happening with the way they are. Well, how do you know that? Well, because if they were going to happen any other way, they would, or something like that.
Yes.
And I think that's beautiful. And I want to give a shout out to Hero Boga, who has been one of my mentors and who has really helped me to get in touch with that feminine side of myself, actually, by accessing poetry, by accessing my, the immigrant ache, as my friend James calls it, when you move countries or you move homes and you're not where you grew up, there's this particular type of uh, ache that comes with that. And how do we get in touch with that, right? And so, I'm not saying we can make the negative positive. That's not what I'm saying, just to be really clear to your listeners. But I'm saying what you're saying, which is we can sit with what is and transmute it and transform it into a beautiful gift. And I think that's the clearest lesson I've had. And I still forget, right? Because that is the process of human development.
100%.
We remember, we forget, we remember, we forget, we remember, we forget.
100%. We're all just
So,
walking each other home, right? And reminding
right.
each other. Well, and it goes back to what your original point was. I think very early in this conversation, you talked about resistance, because when I'm not allowing myself to be with what is, or if I'm creating a story that this is wrong, or it should be a different way, right, then I am resisting what is instead of allowing it and accepting it. And accepting it doesn't mean we're okay with it, but it means we're not trying to change it. We're not trying to force it to be anything other than it is. And that's what's brought me the most peace, is from my suffering. My suffering was always a byproduct of trying to, of resisting life instead of accepting it. Yeah.
And I think just one other thing I'll say there is, I'm learning much more about surrender these days. I thought I knew what surrender was. I had no idea. And the other thing that I'd say that I'm learning, I was brought up in a very strict Irish Catholic household with, a lot of beliefs about how things should be. And so I had a lot of rigidity in my own life about something should be this way, and a lot of judgment when it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So I realized for me personally that a lot of my life, the suffering that I've caused myself is through expectations.
Yes.
And that's very different to having standards, right?
Can you speak to that? Can you define what the difference is for people?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'm the expert on that, but I'll give it a go, which is, for me, expectations are about somebody else's belief. They're about something that have been imposed on me and they cause me suffering. So, I called my friend yesterday, she should have called me back, or that client didn't email me back, that's like rude, or I need to be a certain way, or I want to go to this party and I want it to be this way. So for me, it comes very much from that masculine control, that need for certainty, and it's putting my beliefs on somebody else.
Right.
The flip side of that, I guess, is standards, which is I get very clear on my boundaries. I get very clear on what's important to me in a friendship or what's important to me in a client, and then I create that.
Yeah.
And for me, that has been so much freedom and liberation and joy, and I'm still going through that. You can see probably I'm getting emotional because it's my current playground.
Yeah.
Which is about how do I keep letting go. And the worst part has been for me, I've got like a lot of Virgo in my chart. Mm-hmm. I've got such high expectations of myself. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, my best friend said to me once, Sue, you don't have to do anything to be loved. Like, I just want your presence, and I remember crying when she said that to me because it was so healing for me. And so to let go of that expectation of myself, to your point earlier, I have to do to be worthy. No, you don't. So two things that have really helped me just on a very practical level have been consistency and discipline. And so, I can be a bit all or nothing, like I'm off the booze completely, or I like go crazy, like partying or whatever, right? And especially when I was younger. But I think what I'm learning about at the moment, and it's been a very difficult lesson for me, is moderation.
Mm.
And how can I experience things through the lens of joy? So, not like I have to get up and exercise. It's like I'm lucky that I actually can create my day so that I can create space for myself in the morning so I can exercise.
Right.
So there's a discipline and a practice that comes when you are committed to a path of transformation, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't, but there is for me anyway. And I notice when I'm being not rigid, but consistent, that has a really powerful impact in my life. When I'm eating well, when I'm exercising, when I'm meditating, when I'm doing the things that make me feel full and nourished, actually. What I noticed that's shifted for me, though, that might be useful for people is the energy with which I do that with. So I used to do it from a place of expectation. I should be eating this for dinner, or I should not be drinking, or I should be blah, blah, blah. And I used to go to a healer in Byron Bay here a long time ago, and he was phenomenal. And he used to say to me, Sue, he had a man who used to come and see him for healing who was 90. And he used to drink a couple of shots of whiskey every day and do a few things that we would consider maybe, tricky. And he said, but you know what? He was doing all of that from an energy of joy and love. So therefore, what can actually upset our bodies more is if you want to eat something that traditionally maybe isn't good for you, to actually savor it, enjoy it, and not have the thoughts that certainly a lot of my female clients have, which is beating themselves up afterwards for eating something they shouldn't.
Right. The judgment.
Rather make it,
the judgment. Yeah.
Right. Rather make a conscious decision. I'm going to have this piece of cake because my body, will really love it and enjoy it, and then let it go. Savor life. Savor life has been a really big one for me.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning that, I really am still learning that.
I think that speaks to something that I too have been experiencing over the last 6 months, which is like, it's the releasing of judgment around the rigidity and the judgment and the expectations and the beliefs that I had internalized from my society and my culture, my upbringing around what was right and wrong. Yes. And allow myself to redefine that for myself and allow myself to lean into the belief that I am worthy of enjoying life and pleasures, my body, food, feeling good in my body, working out, like that. It's not a like life. I had this perception that like, if I did things wrong, I would be punished. Right. So if I ate something wrong, then I would be punished for it. If I did the wrong thing in school, I would get in trouble. And so it was always about mitigating the risk and the fear of getting in trouble, not living life from a place of freedom to enjoy and learn from my experiences. It was always like, it was what I describe in the way I teach my clients. I was living life playing defense. I was playing not to lose as opposed to what I do now, which is playing offense, which is from a different energetic state completely, which is that I'm allowed to create my circumstances and enjoy my life and learn from my mistakes and having this growth mindset and this perspective that life's happening for me, not to me, as opposed to the way most people I see, my clients and myself for years and years, which is this defensive, self-protected survival instinct of play not to lose. And it showed up in my life is how do I minimize the risk of making mistakes, getting in trouble, being punished. And therefore at the deepest level, because if I was punished, love would be taken away. Yeah. That was kind of what I internalized. If I did something wrong, then I wasn't lovable, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really, really feeling that as you say that, and how courageous a woman are you to go there and
Mm.
to be working with that. So I want to say thank you on behalf of all women, um, because you're not alone in carrying those beliefs, and how gracious of you to share that today and to give us that gift.
Mm. Yeah. It touches every part of my life. And I think that that is my real work. And I will be working on that for a long time, is all of the places, the belief that I was unlovable, or that if I did it wrong, um, that I wouldn't be enough, or I wouldn't be, loved or accepted. It's, I'm slowly sort of excavating all of these parts where that belief has eroded my life and my ability to love life and enjoy life fully.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that's so powerful. Whereas, my belief has been more about I'm not enough,
Mm-hmm.
and that limits you in a different way, right?
Yeah.
So I love your listeners hearing that here's two women who are committed to the path that have, similarities and then some differences,
Yeah.
because that's the other thing, and I'm sure you see this in your client. This is what keeps me motivated in my work. I've never seen two people that are the same. So we might have similar beliefs, similar ways of
Sure.
showing up in the world, but you are a unique human being with your own genetic um, blueprint, with
Mm-hmm.
your own karma, with your own lessons, with your own life. And how beautiful is that? How beautiful is that we are unique human beings, and yet we can come together as a collective and heal together as well.
Yeah. Well, and I just know that in this, that those listening, that they can see and feel and sense something, and whether it's not my story, maybe they relate to yours and vice versa. I think that's the power of sharing our experiences, and our journey is being able to see part of ourselves in someone else, which gives us so much compassion, and maybe a little bit more perspective and grace for our compassion for ourselves as we navigate, you know um, these experiences and the healing journey, and kind of give ourselves some, like, off the hook a little bit. Especially I think when they hear two people who it's easy to think we have it figured out, right? It's easy to go into that story and think that we've know something that other people don't. And I think that's what I want to bring to folks on this show, is just the you know the authentic truth, that we're all figuring it out and we're all walking each other home. And like you said, we just try to I try to learn from people who are a little bit further along than me. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to be taken from listening to each other's stories.
100%.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Is there anything else you want to share with listeners in terms of practical tips, or just advice that you have people that are in the throes of self-transformation and evolving, in whatever aspect you want to share?
No, just know that this too shall pass. Get the support you need. As you say, Tori, show yourself compassion through this. Commit to some things for you. Know you are worthy. We are all worthy of love.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be afraid to share your story, just like we've done today, because it can help lots of people. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. I mean, I think you just gave a master class in authentic leadership and what that really looks like played out for people, because that's really what we need right now. And we need to know that I would so much rather follow somebody who is broken and figuring it out and learning from life than someone who pretends to have it all together. And so thank you for your authenticity and your willingness to stay committed to the path and lean into the discomfort and the uncertainty, and just be a continual student of life, because that's what being coachable is really all about, is being willing to learn how to do things differently, and be a curious student.
100%. And thank you for co-creating that space.
Mm-hmm.
For,
Yeah.
I think hopefully you feel it too. hopefully demonstrated co-regulation through this conversation, because I feel safe with you, even though we don't know each other for a long time. But there's something about you that allows me to relax, and hopefully you've had the same experience. It's been a delight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How can people stay connected with you? I know they're going to want to, and learn more about what you're doing and just your journey if they want to continue to follow along. Where are you online or anywhere else that they can get to know more about you or stay connected?
Sure. So, look, I'm not great with social media, to be honest. My social media is mainly personal, but I am quite active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So it's Sue McDonnell, McDonnell. And I've got a website, suemcdonnell.com.au, so people can get in touch with me there.
Wonderful.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to starting a podcast myself soon. So I'd love to have you on.
Of course. Happy to do that. And you guys will put all of Sue's information in the show notes, make it super easy for you to navigate and stay connected with her. And I hope you will stay connected with us here at the Coachable podcast. We have an Instagram account that we would love to ask you to follow, maybe tag us if you enjoy listening to the show, and share it with a friend. The best way, though, that you can help this show grow and make sure it gets out to more listeners is by sharing it, but also writing a review, and leaving a rating. Now on Spotify, you're able to leave ratings and reviews. So wherever you listen to your podcast, if you would do me a favor, take 2 minutes out of your day, go leave a rating and a review. And that is just the best way in this podcasting world. It really helps us to be considered in the algorithms and be shown to other people who might enjoy this content. And truly, I tell you this, like, I started on this path because someone shared a podcast with me very similar to this one. And I was able to hear a conversation that I really needed to hear at the time, and gave me, sparked curiosity in me and gave me hope that there was a different way to move forward in my life. And you could be that for somebody if you share this show with them. So thank you for being here. I love you. We'll see you next week on the Coachable podcast.